Great. Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. My name is Karwowski. I'm the CEO and founder of Obviously, and I'm so excited to talk to you three people who are truly doing the work. So I really wanted to actually introduce them myself, because I was really impressed just with our chats prior to this. So if you indulge me. Enzo Gouedar. Enzo serves as the Senior Director of Krug Champagne at Moët Hennessy, USA, the wine and spirits division of LVMH, for all of you who don't work here. Enzo is a passionate luxury industry professional and has over 10 years of multifaceted experience at LVMH. Prior to Krug, Enzo's career has spanned a variety of maisons, from Louis Vuitton, Dior, Veuve Clicquot, Moët Chandon, and Dom Perignon, and a variety of functions, including engineering, product development and brand strategy, marketing and business development, and geographies, France and the US. Enzo currently lives in Brooklyn, New York, with his husband, Julius Tapper, and both recognize the joy and the privilege of the rights afforded by marriage equality and are preparing to build their family. Enzo also serves as the co-founder and co-lead of the bar at Moët Hennessy USA, the LGBTQIA+ ERG at Moët Hennessy USA. The bar champions the rights for the LGBTQIA+ employees to be unapologetically themselves in the wine and spirits industry. The bar provides educational resources, organizes panels and events, and partners on inclusive brand activations, and providing direct support to the community.
Thank you.
And Sophie Claire. Sophie is a passionate marketing strategist with over 10 years of experience developing luxury brands. She currently serves as co-founder and strategy lead at Moët Hennessy's creative content studio, developing innovative campaigns for LVMH's wine and spirits portfolio. Prior to this role, Sophie has a variety of marketing roles at the service of the iconic brands of Hennessy, Moët Chandon, California, and Glenmorangie, and gained market insight from working in Europe and the USA. She holds a marketing degree from Sciences Po, Paris, and a graphic design degree from Parsons. She also serves as the co-founder and co-lead of the bar at Moët Hennessy USA. And last but not least, Randy Baran is the manager of talent development and engagement for Christian Dior Couture Americas, where he has been since 2018 and previously worked in talent development for LVMH North America and as student HR manager for Purdue University's Dining and Catering, where he also received his degree in retail management. Randy currently serves as co-chair for All LVMH Pride, which he was a founding member of in 2019. All LVMH Pride is LVMH's employee resource group for LGBTQIA+ employees and allies. Since its launch, it has grown into a community of more than 800 members. That's awesome. And a co-maison leadership team of 17 people. In 2020, they were the recipient of LVMH's Inclusion Index Award. And today, they are continuing to expand their offering and establish more local chapters around the world. Randy is a passionate driver for creating opportunities for career development, bringing teams together, and championing inclusion in the workplace and the community. So awesome job, guys. I think it's really important we recognize the work that they're doing. So could you tell us a little bit about the history of your employee resource groups? How did you start? Let's just start from there.
Sure, I can go first. Good morning, everyone. My name is Randy. And our story starts 3 years ago, actually, in this very room. I think it's actually 3 years ago exactly to the day. LVMH hosted 2 large events, one in New York City and one in Paris, and it was our first ever Pride event that LVMH was hosting. It was in this room, and it was full of people. It gathered a lot of our local brand presidents and CEOs and heads of HR, and LVMH signed on to the UN Standards of Conduct against LGBT discrimination in the workplace. So this was a really incredible moment for the group, and everybody left feeling very inspired, but I think a lot of us were also wondering, well, what's next? And we wanted to make sure that the next Pride event that happened wasn't a year from then, the following Pride Month. And so there was a group of around 15 of us that gathered, and we had a breakfast together, and we talked about what does a year-round commitment to the LGBTQIA community look like for LVMH. So that same group of around 15 of us started meeting regularly, talking about what we wanted to see from a group like LVMH Pride, which later came to be. And it started with a lot of us just sharing our own personal stories, getting to know each other, and a lot of us ended up sharing our coming out stories, and it got emotional at times. And that's where we really started to lay the framework and the foundation for LVMH Pride. We met over the course of a few months to establish our mission, vision, purpose, identify our branding, our main objectives we wanted to accomplish, and that took some time. But finally we were ready, and we hosted our first in-person event at the Moët Hennessy offices, actually, in February of 2020. And so I had started as our events lead, and I was like, great, we have this amazing event, and we envisioned that we would slowly expand by doing events like that in different cities across the US. But then the pandemic happened 2 weeks later, and instead we pivoted to doing virtual events, and we ended up expanding much more rapidly than we ever thought we would. People started inviting their colleagues from the West Coast or from Asia or Europe to join, and rapidly our member list grew to around 500 people that all wanted to be a part of this. And so we started hosting different year-round events, which we're still doing, both virtual and now in person, that are finally resuming. And now we actually have a few different ERGs that are also in place at the Maison level for LVMH. So those are at Moët Hennessy, Sephora, Tiffany & Co., and Starboard. So I'll let them speak to how the bar started at Moët Hennessy.
I can go first if you want, but it's a story that we usually tell together with Sophie, so it's very ingrained in what we present. We started inspired by all LVMH Pride, to be honest. And Sophie and I, from the start, were like, we want to be involved, we want to do more for our community. And then George Floyd happened, and at Moët Hennessy, it's really when things kicked off for ERGs, and the ERG were created. And so Sophie and I kind of jumped on and decided to become a co-lead of the LGBTQ ERG. And then I think so that's 2020. And the first year, really, we focused on building our kind of what we were here for, who we were, our DNA, actually, very marketer driven. But very important for us to build the foundation of who we were, and finding our name. Actually, it's a good branding exercise, the bar, and for us, the bar is very important, and I'm going to let Sophie tell you a bit more about why we are called the bar, because it's really also her who find it, so I will give her credit for that amazing name.
All right, thanks, Enzo. I think for us in the beginning, that was important to really create a group that people could rally, and to do that we needed to find, of course, a vision and mission, which we wrote collectively with our first member, but also because we're a lot of marketing people in this group, we decided to brand it ourselves. And during this brainstorming session, we were looking for really a name that was extremely meaningful, both for the community and for our industry. And we looked into the roots of the movement, the first, riot at Stonewall, and the importance of bars and places of partying, of getting together, of drinking, in the importance of being the first safe spaces for the community. And of course, at Moët Hennessy, we sell wine and spirits, and we're into the business of working with bars and with clubs and with high-end restaurants. And it became really an evidence for us that we would brand ourselves the bar, because that's the perfect intersection between the business that we're running and the safe space that is so important in this community, and has been, and hopefully still is, although the scene has changed quite a lot. And we've really seen actually the impact of creating that name, creating that logo, because that was really a symbol, a very simple, straightforward symbol of what people were joining. And that's also when our membership started to grow, and we started recruiting once we had established ourselves with a vision and just a way to share it, very simply for graphics.
So as you're all founding members, what are some, and for anyone who is at a company that does not have an ERG, actually show of hands, how many of you are at companies that do not have ERGs? Good job, everyone. Okay, so that's good. What are some, some tips and tricks for really getting one off the ground and sustaining?
Sure. Do you have an hour on this one? First, I would start by saying that I'm really interested to chat around that topic with you, about how do we make a successful ERG, and how we can network and how we can improve ourselves, because in short, I think nobody gave us the guidebook of how to create an ERG. So that's something that was pretty much tested and learned for all of us. We were talking about it yesterday. I think it started with this exercise of establishing what we stand for. And then came the idea, the need of being like, okay, now that we know what's the vision, that what actions are we able to take? I think that was really an ambition in the beginning that was very high, and the first year we achieved a lot, but we also realized that there's only so much you can do with your resources, and you have to be realistic about it, although the excitement is really there. Being an ERG lead is really almost a second job. You have to organize, you have to manage, you have to advocate, you have to create the events, and really follow through with the level of execution that your company is expecting. So I guess as a first tip on what's working, and I'll pass on to my colleague, is really patience. It takes time. And also one other thing that struck me was the ability to listen to your community and people who join your group, because most people come to contribute to the community and work with you, but they also come to be welcomed and to be listened to. And I think there's a place for ERG groups like us to be a safe space, and it's a really important part of the process.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Sophie just said. I would just add that one thing that we learn through the process, I think, is also push empowerment. And I think through time, we really reworked our structure at the bar to empower more our members and make them co-lead make them co-lead in a sense, like make them pillar owners of some of our key strategies, so that they can then come up with ideas and bring them to life. And I think today, you know, like we hear only because of Liz that is in the room, and she is the lead of our community building. She's an ally also, I think that's important to notice, and she did a ton. She's really leading the Pride programming for the bar. And so I think that's important. That's all her ideas, and we empowered her and let her run and build what she thought would be great. And that's also a better way for us to work and to find a balance, because as Sophie said, it's a lot of like time commitment on top of our jobs, and it needs we need a village to make things move and to make things happen.
Is this working? Okay. I completely agree with everything that they were saying. I think back to what Sophie was mentioning, you need to be realistic about what you can accomplish in the short term or the long term. I think when you first bring everybody together, there's a lot of passion and ideas, and I think you need to be realistic about what can you do now till the first year versus what are things that are maybe more of a long-term plan that you can work towards. I think it also starts with making sure that you have the right people in place that are really passionate about the cause, but can also make the commitment. Because as they've mentioned, we spend a lot of time on this, so you need to make sure that you have people that can turn that passion into action. And also make sure that you have the right partners in place too. We have a couple really incredible executive sponsors that we've worked with at LVMH that we know are advocating for us. And you also need to make sure that the people involved, that you have the support of their managers too. So I'm really fortunate. I actually have my director and my SVP here, and they've been super supportive of me making the time commitment to LVMH Pride, and they recognize the important work and impact that it has at LVMH.
After you get started and there is that initial passion and excitement, how do you really sustain the organization over the longer term? Are there any pieces of advice you'd give?
Yeah, I can start. So I guess our group first started, we had a really great leader, our chair, who ended up having a mobility to Europe. We started our initial structure knowing that we needed a lead for communications, definitely, events, and community partnerships. And so from there, we started to build out the structure of that, but we've ended up pivoting our structure over time too. So it's changed a couple different times. We'll probably revise it again. Currently, we have our committee team split between our 5 different pillars of objectives, which is community building, primarily events, education and awareness, which is mostly through communications, resource and consulting, community service and volunteering, and career development. So that's how everybody's organized now, but we're constantly, as Sophie mentioned, we don't have a playbook. We're kind of learning as we go and learning through experience, so we'll continue evolving it over time.
We kind of Sophie and I are also a member of all LVMH Pride, so we we pay attention to what they do, and we look up to them. So we reorganize ourselves as well through pillars. Ours are like community building, education, volunteering, brand activation, and intersectionality. And so through that, we've seen a shift in people's engagement. I think empowerment is, again, important. I was talking about it earlier, but making people owners of their ideas and giving them budget and resources to achieve it, then that completely changed the game. One thing we also did is, I think we started, as Sophie said, around a lot of, foundational work, a lot of work. It was not always fun, not always a safe space, moment, but more about like, let's build ourselves. And I think we moved a bit away from that afterwards to focus more on conversations, and on sharing. And I think some of our great breakthrough came from moment of sharing. And I don't know if you want to talk about it. Maybe Sophie, you want to talk about the education work and the future training that we're going to do, because I think that came from a member, and I can go on. But.
Sure, I'll do that. So the moment that Enzo is referencing is actually one of our younger member who opened a discussion about how to navigate the corporate space, being a queer person, and how to make sure that you balance out your personal life, your professional life, and you come whole to the office. And it triggered really a conversation where everyone, shared their story, give their advices. Some older people said, well, for me, I was like closeted for a super long time, but is it really a good solution? Probably not, but you have to read the room and know if you can really come out. And it's like a constant dance that I think a lot of us in this room can feel about, constantly reading the room and realizing if it's okay or not to disclose. But from that conversation, we discussed all together, and we all realized that actually the solution to be safe at work is to educate everybody else around you to react the right way. And so from that conversation, we are starting a project of a company-wide training around Gender 101, around transgender identity, around bias, around microaggression. And I'm really proud to say that we're doing it in partnership with the Fleet Project, with Rob sitting here. And also want to give a massive shout out to Caitlin, who's sitting there and who's leading that work stream, because that was her idea. And I think that's how also we keep the momentum by making sure that our members can carry through their ideas, because it's really important and it's really meaningful to them and to us.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think along that same vein, if you're a member of the corporation, not necessarily a member of the ERG, how to best interact with the ERG, how to really get the most out of it?
I can start. I would just say, don't be afraid to ask a question. I think, especially if you're not part of an ERG or a community or whatever your identity is, I think it's okay to be curious. It's okay to be asking questions. I think it's better to ask a question than to do something wrong. Sometimes it's just about, to admit that you don't know everything. Like there is power in vulnerability. I think in minority groups or in ERGs, we are vulnerable, and we come from a place of vulnerability to power. I think when you're in power positions, I think it's okay as a leader to accept your vulnerability and know that you're not perfect and you don't know everything. So I think what I always tell, and I think we've done a lot of work at MHRSA on education with Sophie, kind of like advocating for our group and kind of meeting all our leaders and be like, this is our communities, this is what we stand for, this is the bar. And a lot of them have been very candid on their lack of awareness, their lack of education, their lack of exposure to the community, to be honest. So there's a lot of work to do in the Wine and Spirits on this, because it's a very male-dominated industry. So I think it's interesting to see how, by being embraced by our leadership, and I think we're very lucky at MHRSA to have great leaders that really support us and support the ERGs, then that really changed the context and allow people in place of powers to be vulnerable and ask questions.
What does that support look like? or like what's the best version of that support?
I think support first from our exec team is representation, visibility, advocating for the community, and it's very simply opening doors, like opening doors to meetings where we wouldn't have access usually, giving us a place at the table. Like we were last year in the meeting with all of our sales team, head of all of the sales, and one of them simply asked us, what does LGBTQIA plus means, right? And I think we were honestly a little surprised about the question, but I think it shows that you need to meet people where they're at, because if you don't, there's no use for us to be there. I think we all have in our personal life maybe a way of advocating that's a bit different from this, but you have to adapt your message because this is corporate. And you can still do a lot of things in corporate, but you have to maybe dial down a few things or just adapt the way you talk to people. And I think what our exec teams are doing is that they help us navigate that, and they open new forums for us to preach the message. ERG is a lot about repetition. You're never over with sharing the message.
That actually reminds me of a phrase that I've heard: awareness is a marathon. And I think when I think of support, I'm thinking of the support we've gotten from LVMH, and I think it's having their support to push our messages within different important circles, thinking of with the different brand presidents, with LVMH in Paris, to be able to make sure that they're advocating for us. Another form of support is financial support too. So thinking of the budget that we have, we, of course, starting out as a brand newly formed group, we didn't have any budget, but over time, seeing how resourceful we could be and plan different amazing programs on little to no budget, we've been able to get more of a built-up budget over time so we can do even more.
And are there any surprises you guys have encountered in founding these ERGs?
Yeah, I guess surprise for me as we started was visibility and the enthusiasm around the group and how people were eager to share. For me personally, a bit of a surprise was some sort of a coming out at work without me realizing it, which happened because we led the group. But I think it's also a way to just release your identity in a way that's useful. So that was a bit of a personal surprise on my end.
I think for me, I underestimated the impact on other employees' life. I think when we have more vulnerable sharing sessions and hearing how, just the fact that the group exists change the motivation of an employee and how he feels, how they feel going to work, and feel more comfortable being themselves with their boss, with their teams, when that employee in the past received pressure to come out sometimes or repercussion of being gay, which is still true. It's still like we are a company that happened and that happened not that long ago. I think hearing that and now feeling that that person is just a different person, like they feel different because they fully themselves at work, and they supported. And I think when he shared that, I was like, oh my God, that makes it all worth it. All the work, all the sweats, all of a sudden you're like, I at least changed someone's life, and that's to me what I was the most surprised with.
I totally agree with that. I didn't anticipate the level of impact that we would have too. I know of several people who have come out because of our group, and they've expressed that to me, and that means a lot to me, including one senior executive, which was a really special moment. I also was surprised to see how many allies would show up too. Through different surveys that we've done, we know that around a third of our members are allies to the community, and it's really meaningful for us to have so many allies that are a part of the group as well too. So we try to make sure that they always feel fully included and safe in the space. And a lot of them are either they have family members or close friends or colleagues who are LGBTQ, of course. We have a lot of parents of LGBTQ children that are in our group that show up because they want to know how they can be a better parent for their child. So we've had some really incredible programs where people have shared openly and said, my child just came out and I want to know how best to support them. And somebody else will chime in and say, I just went through that same experience. Let's connect offline and see how we could learn from each other. So very cool to see moments like that happen.
Yeah, that's really amazing. It just seems like there's you're doing such great work, but then also there's just like the intrinsic value of existing that is also really impactful too, which is cool. Oh, awesome. And then I think on the subject of intersectionality, there are other ERGs, in the organization or in the corporation. How do you see your role kind of interacting with them?
On this one, I think that's one of the pillars we really wanted to establish in the very beginning. So we've started last year with organizing panels with other ERGs within our company. The first one, and that was really an idea that came up from a connection with a coworker, was around families and LGBT. Because we also have an ERG that's a parents group, and there was really the willingness to discuss that topic around not all families look the same. There's your blood family, there's your chosen family, which is a really important notion for the community, but also there's family created by two men, two women, there's like transgender parents and kids, and how do we navigate that topic in corporate, and how do we acknowledge that? So we did this first panel, and Rob again was with us, so thanks again for being with us last year. And I think there was a really open and sensitive conversation around just sharing ideas, sharing notions, sharing different experience for people to recognize themselves within when they don't recognize themselves with the cookie cutter, two parents, two kids, sort of pattern. And that's something we want to continue. So this year we're organizing another panel in partnership with our Latinx ERG around the intersectionality of LGBT and Latinx. And we thought about, in the beginning, maybe doing it with other ERGs, AAPI or Black ERG, but we decided no, we're going to take identities really one by one and explore really in depth what it means to have the intersectionality of those two identities, because it's so nuanced that we can't just do a panel with everyone. We would need like 5 hours to explore that. So it's really taking it one by one and make sure that we include more of the other ages in our conversation, and on the other end, that we also get LGBT presence in the other panels that they organize. So for example, for International Women's Day, we made sure there was representation from a queer woman within the panel, because it's often something that's being overlooked. So we're trying to make sure that there's more exchange between those groups.
We partner a lot too with the different ERGs across LVMH, and I think exactly as you said, it allows opportunities for conversations around intersectionality, which has become a huge topic for us since last year. And so just to share quickly, at LVMH, there are 3 different employee resource groups that are at the group level. So we have LVMH for women and women empowerment, LVMH Pride, and then LEAD, which just launched earlier this year, which is LVMH Employees of African Descent. And anybody can be a part of any of the groups, but and then we have a variety of different ERGs in place at the Maison levels. So we're constantly partnering with the different ERGs. We have a strong network across the group, and knowing that it does take a lot of work to put on these programs, it allows you to have, for example, if it's Women's History Month that we're doing a program for, how can LVMH Pride jump in and support so that's not all only on the women's ERG to bring everything together? Or during Black History Month, how can LVMH Pride be a part of supporting during this month so that everything isn't falling on our lead group? So it's a way to make the conversations even more rich and also share the workload of putting on these different programs.
Awesome. And where do you see your ERGs going within the organization?
I think for us, since the beginning with Sophie, I think we wanted to make sure that after becoming a safe space and something that was like walking, we wanted to make sure that we become a BRG, so Business Resource Group. And really, that's I think where we are right now, if I'm completely honest, is like we are that moment of transformation where we want to be very intentional with brands, with our brands, and becoming business resource, from an insights perspective, from a research perspective, from helping them build programming, marketing, and make sure that we are part of the conversation. We are in those meetings where decisions are made early, because sometimes can be an afterthought, which is better than no thoughts. I just think that is important to notice. But how do we push a little the organization? And so we're being a bit pushy, but that's okay. I think that's okay to be a bit pushy sometimes and be like, we want to be in that conversation, or we use our executive sponsor, Alison is one of them, to help us kind of like break the barriers, push the door, and be like, yes, you need to talk to the bar ERG if you want to activate around the LGBT community, we should be involved. And so that's where we are right now, at trying to crack that moment of transformation.
Yeah, I love that idea of having a business resource group. I'm like, hey, how do we affect the business, not just the corporate culture?
I think like they were speaking about in the earlier panel too, it's great to start first internally, and that's how you can really make it seem most authentic whenever you do start to communicate externally. So I think what I would like to see us start doing more in the future is even more external partnerships. We have a charity partner, the Ali Forney Center, that we've started partnering with more this year, that supports homeless LGBTQ youth in New York City. Really incredible organization, and I want to see even more different community networks and organizations that we can work with to take it beyond just our LVMH employees.
And how have you seen just the marketing of the corporation or the different organizations within the corporation be affected by the work you're doing in the ERG?
I think we're getting there. I think we see at first, like Enzo said, that was a lot of push, right? And I think we're starting to see the pull. And I think it's because the common language that we try to talk to with them is simply business, simply realizing that, the society as a whole is becoming much more diverse. And then brands need to learn how to talk to everyone. And that means being, representing different people in your campaigns. That means also walking the talk internally. And I think brands are more and more open to it. Chad and Alison were mentioning it. I think it takes time for our brands, because everybody is very cautious of making it right. Every year at Pride, Enzo and I go on a competition of, looking into the worst campaigns that are out. There's a terrible sandwich packaging that got released this year by Mark and Spencer. All of the banks are banking with Pride. Everybody's shaving with Pride, whatever with Pride. So that's really the one thing that we want to avoid at any cost. And I see a lot of nods out there. And I think that's why there's actually a lot of conversation internally with brands. But it's going to take us time to really release something that feels genuine.
Yeah, I think they mentioned, the previous panel mentioned, we are centuries-old brands, so we don't change fast at LVMH. That's not something that we do very fast. I think we make good progress, but I think it's never the goal to radically change, because then I think that can be not genuine, actually. I think it's how do you start internally and then build outside, walk the talk before preaching to others. And I think for me, I'm a brand lead and as well at LVMH, and I'm very conscious in my brand on and in pushing my team on do we have representation? Do we have inclusivity? Do you have diversity into what we do? And that comes from chef partner that we work with. That comes from people that come at the event, not only the influencers, but the people that we invite. Have we been forceful into thinking about who, beyond just the influencer and the celebrities, who else are we inviting? It's important to go fully through the line of things that we can do, and small little change make a big impact. I think we started from a place of nearly nothing in an industry that is, again, very cis male built, and so I think that's something that for me, any steps is a big step, and so I think that's important to notice and to acknowledge.
Just wanted to add one quick point to that. LVMH is a French company, And we very much feel, the influence of France in everything we do. We both started working in France. I can tell you that the US is way ahead in terms of the conversation on diversity as a whole, and LGBT in particular. And that's why we have to constantly, work here, but also explain to folks in France that things are changing here and they're changing fast, and we need to adapt, but we need also to champion the game. But it's like we have to embark them with us, and sometimes it's slowing us a little bit, but we're getting there. But I think really we can feel in that space that the US is really ahead of the game in terms of incorporating diversity into the corporate space, which is a space where you can foster change. And France is getting there, but it's going to take a little longer, for sure.
Are you doing any cross-cultural type campaigns within the ERG, or is that just, you got a lot on your plate already, but.
Well, very soon, we hope so.
And what are your thoughts on Pride Month? Just kind of good, the bad. Would love to just.
Obviously, I love Pride Month overall. It's a fun time. It's a lot of work for us, but it's I think that on one hand, all of the visibility is so important, but I think as we've been talking about today, there can be a lot of rainbow washing during Pride Month too, and I think I want to always make sure that we're remembering that yes, Pride can be a celebration, but it also needs to be a time for us to reflect on all of the injustices that people are still facing in the community, both here and around the world. I think especially today, as there's so much anti-LGBTQ legislation that's being proposed across the country, and so many hate crimes that are still happening, there's so much work still to do. And I think we need to remember that Pride started as, the first Pride Parade was a march, and it happened after a riot because LGBTQ people were being persecuted in a safe space. And so I think we need to always remember the roots of that and make sure that we keep that same spirit, that we're always pushing forward and supporting any other people that are still facing injustices out there.
I agree fully, and I think what I think about Pride is, to me, it never was Pride only in June. I think I also like that in the US, is that Pride is not always in June for some cities. And I think pushing ourselves as an ERG, actually, even us, we're pushing ourselves very hard, is what do we do outside of June? And how do we use June as more of a awareness kind of play to project on initiatives that we're going to do the rest of the year. And for us, for example, I'm just as an example, we're using June to announce that we're going to do the training with the Fleet project, but the training is going to be something that is going to happen in July and available for all our employees all year. So I think that's using that moment as a kickstart of a year-long programming is super important, and it's worked for us honestly a lot during Pride, but I think it's also it will be helpful in the future to have a more balanced programming, so not all focus on Pride, and make sure that Pride is every day and Pride is all year long.
I agree with the both of you. I don't know what's left to be said. I would say that beyond, the work and, the numbers that are still scary and the advocacy, I think it's also a great time just to celebrate, to be happy, to party. I mean, being in June in New York is probably the best month of the year, and you can feel people really in those places, in those parties, being so happy to be out, to be there, and to be without judgment. And I think that's also something we should remember about Pride, that there's a lot of positive about it to celebrate. And not necessarily to be embraced by corporation, just try to keep that initial movement of people just being happy to celebrate.
Really quickly too, I'm thinking about Pride Month, and like she said, June in New York during Pride Month is it's an incredible experience. Reflecting back on the purpose of us as an ERG too, we always wanted to make sure that people that are not in these very progressive liberal places, if they are in either they're in maybe a middle America state or in another country where they don't feel like they can find that community, I think we see it as our job to make sure that they can still join our different programs we're putting on during Pride Month and still find a community.
So how do you do that when it's not an event-based type of activation?
It is mostly through different virtual events that we do. So like as we are finally returning in person, we want to make sure that we're still keeping the virtual aspect because we know it means a lot to people who can't be there in person to still be able to tune in.
Yeah, I think the virtual really, is it working? All right. I think the virtual space was really a great discovery for all of us because we know the reach we have through virtual, we could never be able to have it through in person. So we try to go for those hybrids where we have the in person, we still record and broadcast. But I'm confident that a lot of the allies who are joining us online discreetly, maybe without their camera, but they're listening, they're here, they maybe wouldn't be here in person. But they're here now with us, and although they're quiet, they're present, and that's really what matters.
I think on our side also, we are trying to build more programming outside of HQ. You know, HQ is in New York for us. And so we're trying, it's hard. It's not that easy because usually it's one person in one of our office in a smaller state that might be of the community, and for them to build maybe like a office takeover, an activation for their colleagues to go in an LGBTQ bar. That's a lot of work on top of what they do, and they're alone. So I think that's something that we are working on, is how do we engage even more our community, original communities, to help those moments.
And on the topic of allyship, what do you think like the best way for allies within the organization to support the ERG could be?
I would say the first is to come and say, hey, I'm here, I want to do something, and then ask what could be useful or be able to identify it. I think we have a lot of allies who come, like Enzo and Randy said, not really knowing what to do. It's like, hey, you know, my brother just came out, or I have a best friend in the community, or I really want to do something. And sometimes they come with a little bit of shyness, so I think it's about us welcoming the effort to just raising their hands and say, hey, I want to be an ally. But then once you've joined and you say you want to do something, then you have to do something. And I think that's the part that some people don't get about allyship, is that it's actually work. It's just not saying you support, and some people in our group are doing that very, very, very well. I'm looking at Liz again. But, you know, ally is a part-time job, I would say. And it's really listening to what's useful and using their platform, using maybe their role or the access they have to push that message day in, day out.
Allyship is a verb. It's not necessarily a noun. So it does need to be actively acted upon. And I think it's showing up to our spaces and listening, learning, absorbing, and then taking it beyond and seeing spaces that we're not present in, and how can you speak on other people's behalf when they're not in the room?
And then, since we are brand innovators and we're marketers, what would you say to marketers about activations, planning something to really speak to this community?
I think, I mean, Addison and Chad touched on it. I think going back to your values, the value of your brands, what are your true values? What is your DNA? What are your values? And then start thinking about what do they mean to the modern world, to the communities. And there is always, you can always find a link. I mean, we are creative people, we are marketers. I think it's just about expressing those values, you know, through the lens of a diversity and inclusion, through the lens of a community. And that's super important. I think to me that's the starting point, because if you don't do that, then nothing that you're going to do is going to be genuine. And then I think about long-term commitment versus short-term. For me, yes, you have to start somewhere. So sometimes I hear, oh, we've never done that in the past. We don't feel like we're legitimate in that space, or talking to that community. I was like, well, you need to start, but if you start, you need to do it long-term. You need to have something in place that is long-term, that is going to impact the community, help the community, provide change. And I think if you, otherwise it's not genuine and kind of frivolous. And so I think, especially in luxury brands like ours, we can be very quickly frivolous and ungenuine by the nature of like luxury as a business. But I think it's super, super important to keep that in mind. What
can I add to that? I was wondering. It's a really good start. I really relate to the long-term, commitment. I think there's brands in our space, in the wine spirits world, like Absolute, for example, vodka, that have been partners of the community for 10, 20 years. And of course now, whatever they do is legitimate because they've really built that relationship. And that's so important. But to me, it's really about thinking about marketing and the campaign you're going to do at every level. Like it's great if you decide to do a packaging with a rainbow on it. All right. But then, is there a donation behind it? And then beyond that, what do you do, for example, in the bar community, what do you do to educate your sales team who's going to go and visit LGBT bars? Are they equipped for that? Do they know how to talk to those type of accounts? And it's really, to me, thinking beyond if you say externally that you're supporting the community and get a profit off of it commercially, then you need to make sure that you tap all of the layers of your organization, starting with your employee and how you promote LGBT employees inside the community, to make sure that you have your ducks in a row, and then you can really communicate outwards. So that's what I would say. And I think, just walking around New York City, there's a lot of stickers about Pride on all of the windows, and every time I walk by, I just want to take a Sharpie and write, where's the donation? Or who are you donating to? Because I'm not sure that work is being done.
And I think it's also thinking about the less visible things. I think it's easy to just put a rainbow on something and call it a day, but thinking through the other parts of your business too, that thinking of like, are you working with diverse vendors? What are your employee policies as it relates to the LGBTQ community? If you have an employee that's transitioning or has a same-sex partner, what are their benefits looking like? So reflecting on all those different things across all your different business functions to make sure that you're operating as an inclusive workplace internally. And like I said, the things that are less visible are even more impactful than putting a rainbow sticker on something.
Awesome. So I'd love now to open it up for questions. Does anyone have any? Yes. Yeah.
Green's my favorite color. Cool. Okay. Hi. So question, we see so many brands putting the rainbow on with Pride, and it's like a pride washing of everything. You said Absolute, which is kind of my question, but who's doing it really well? That maybe hasn't done it for 20 years, like you, like a big brand that's doing it really well.
Wow, that's a tricky question. Might call for like my sidekicks here to help. Really, in the wine and spirit space, Absolute is the one that comes, first and foremost to my mind. I would again call out for Rob here and the work that he does, working with brands, with a lot of fashion brands for Pride. I'm sure you're going to talk to that a little later, so I won't steal the thunder. So I would say pretty much those two, to be honest. Do you have other example?
I think recently I've been impressed by Versace, for example, and I'm going to go outside, still luxury, but outside the group. I think they made a 10 million commitment to the community. They are activating every year, being very vocal about their Pride programs, advocacy, obviously partnership with celebrities, etc. But they also recently have been really spending a lot more money towards the community. I think making a pledge of 10 million to a foundation that is going to support the community in various ways, I think is showing kind of like a strong commitment. So I think they could get a bit of credit for that.
Actually, I just got another one. So there's this initiative still in the wine and spirit space, because that's a space we look into a lot. But I believe Jägermeister launched an initiative 2 years ago called the Lesbian Bar Project, which was really interesting to me because it's a topic that's often overlooked in the greatest LGBT community, focusing on the lesbian community. Here in the US, there's only 10 lesbian bars left. For the entire US, there's 3 in New York, there's a few in San Francisco, a few elsewhere, but it amazes me that those type of safe spaces are disappearing in a continent so big as the US. There's only 10 of them. So what actually Jägermeister sponsored through a videographer is creating a movie around the story of those women who created those bars and those very important spaces and why they're dying at the moment. and really establishing a sort of donation and foundation around that. That was a pretty confidential, I would say confidential project. There wasn't a ton of noise around it, but to me it felt extremely genuine, also tackling a subject that is not really mainstream, but yet is still super, super important.
I can't think of the name of the brand off the top of my head, but it was a recent car commercial that was done, and it featured, you know, families driving in a car. I don't know, does anybody know it? No? I can't remember, but it showed a few different types of families. There was a gay couple. There was, I think, one that they seemed gender nonconforming. And there was a lesbian couple, and there were, you know, it was great to be able to see different types of that nuclear family unit that I think traditionally in marketing, I think most of us grew up seeing. What was it? Cadillac. Okay, I think I grew up seeing, you know, on screen, a man, a woman, and 2.5 kids. And I always wondered, how am I going to fit into that? And so I think that representation is so important. And yes, I think it was a pride campaign they were doing, but if you do those things all throughout the year, just thinking of the people that you're featuring, it's so important to show different types of families and relationships within your campaigns.
Question?
So, over there or over here? Where to? Okay, cool. Hey, so first of all, this is awesome work, and y'all are doing. This is a great example. So thank you for everything you've shared. For employees who are less sure about joining, I'm curious for some advice, because I've thought that they could use the experience they get in the ERG to maybe try a stretch position, or even put it on the resume as something they could say they did for something they do in the future. I'm curious if that's advice you give, that's something you observe in your organizations too.
Definitely. I mean, I would say at MHRSA, and I can talk for myself as a co-lead, I've seen a lot of benefit from my career, my personal career, you know, of being part of the bar. But I think it's also, for me, it changed me. You know, it changed who I was drastically, and what it helped me do is use my identity as a power, you know, as a place of power. I think that's what I'm telling when I have like newcomers in my team or newcomers in the company that I run across, is like, what are you doing to, you know, empower yourself? Because that's, at the end of the day, it's all about branding yourself to the company and building your career. And so you do a good job, that's great, but that's not going to get you somewhere. Like, now you're expected to go to do some extra work. And I think thinking about giving back to your company, building a better culture, I think is a great thing to say when you like face your manager or your people persons and say, hey, I've been involved in the company trying to be an agent of change. I joined an ERG, I'm active. I think that's great for your career, and also it's great for yourself, for your soul. You know, it's just, for me, any time I spend working on the bar, I feel like my soul gets better. You know, it's just it's the best time I spend of my day. It's maybe the hardest part, but also the most rewarding part, the most exciting part. If you have told me that 5 years ago I would be co-leading the bar and creating like virtual events with drag queens, with the Fluid Project, like educating people around my community, I would have never believed it. And doing it, I was so proud, like literally so proud of who I was and of my community. And so I think that's changed a lot of myself going at work.
And it's something we can also pay forward, which I think is the best thing. Like, now that we've organized ourselves with Enzo and as co-chair, but we also have 5 people within the team who are raising, you know, their hand, and they're creating their own ideas and leading it, including this summit today. I mean, for us, it's really about them carrying their ideas. So it's like an additional task force they can look into, they can sell forward, but also working for an ERG, you learn a lot of skills. You learn leadership, you learn mentorship, you learn to try to rally people to work on something where no one has the time, but everybody wants to. So to me, especially for more junior members, it's really an exploration of, you can be in a role of leadership in this group, disregarding of your age or your position, and you can do things that actually is not in your day-to-day scope of work, and maybe you're not empowered there, but here, if you have the idea and you have the energy and motivation, you can be a leader. And I think it's really something that we hope our members do, and that's really a benefit for them personally, but also they can use that to get ahead in the company.
Completely agree. It's a fantastic career development opportunity that I think all of us, especially on the steering committees, have experienced. Now we're trying to think, how do we extend that to our other members too? But in terms of being on a steering committee, just the exposure that you're able to get, developing all these skills, like you said, of leadership, communication, persuasion, our negotiation skills have improved. I think our resourcefulness, it's been a really great opportunity for all of us. And like you said, it's sort of an equalizer of a space where the leveling doesn't matter quite as much. I'm a manager level, and my co-chair is a vice president, and we operate as true partners together. And we have people from all different levels that are part of our steering committee, but anybody can step in and put in the work, and whoever is willing to put in the work is going to end up reaping the benefits whenever they can make these amazing things happen. I'd also add to, sorry, really quick, if you're not sure about joining, I'd say you could try to just join as a general member. It doesn't mean that you have to take on a leadership position, but even just getting involved and starting small and then going from there with seeing how you want to involve yourself.
I just wanted to first of all say thank you for being here, and I love the fact that your leadership team put the people that are actually leading these initiatives on those chairs. That is very refreshing to see, because you can tell you guys live this every day. And it's awesome to see. So that's number one. And also, I love the branding. I mean, that's a heck of a campaign. Join us at the bar. I might just steal that. That's really cool. Question for you. You know, I think you mentioned what brands can do that is more meaningful than slapping stickers, right? You talked about donation, obviously. So if I were to almost take it one step further, because big brands, it's quite easy for them to just write a check, right? It's very easy for you to make that donation to a community program. And we have amazing volunteers here. Sam introduced, you know, right at the top. But like, what else can a brand do that is a little bit more meaningful, that is a community-based initiative beyond just writing a check? I know you guys do it, but maybe one or two examples would be awesome. Thank you.
And I think what would be great is when you're a brand and you think about making a donation, instead of just what you do when you're a brand and you want to make a donation, you look them up. You're like, what are they about? And then you say, okay, maybe I'm going to contact them, and be like, you're going to talk, and you write the check, which is not bad, but not great also. I think for me, the way I would want to approach it further is, let's meet with this association, with this nonprofit, and let's listen to what their planning is, their programming is. Like, obviously, like, charities have their own agenda, their own things that they want to put forward, their own programs, events. How do you show up to them beyond just writing a check? You know, for us, it's sometimes quite easy to do. You know, we are a wine and spirits brand. They do events, like usually people at events like to drink. So, you know, it's as simple as that, but like listening to what they are and what they are trying to achieve, so that you can be genuinely part of their journey, not just writing them a check, but also using your awareness to, you know, the awareness of your brand to elevate their awareness, their programming, what they want to do. I think that's super important.
I mean, to me, what's really important is everything that the company or the brand does, but don't talk about internally. And I think, to me, it should start there. Like Randy mentioned, are we sure that our healthcare benefits are inclusive of everyone? Or are we sure that maybe we have special training in HR to make sure we push the advancement of LGBT employees? Things like that. It's not necessarily something you're going to have to brag about on your website, or you're going to talk about in June. But to me, what the company can do that's really, really genuine is do the internal work and maybe be quiet about it. So hopefully that happens in a lot of companies. We don't hear about it. That's, you know, my hope. But to me, that's really the real step.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. No more questions, right? Everyone's good? Oh, we're at time. Okay, we're at time. All right. We have a 15-minute break now, and then we're going to meet back over here. So feel free to interact and connect with each other, get some food. Thank you, Enzo, Sophie, Randy, and May. That was amazing.